What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. Today we're going to continue our Brothers War Pauper set review with the red cards. As usual, joining me is my good friend Mayo, otherwise known as Josh. What's up, man? You ready to dive into these red cards?
Oh yeah.
All right, let's get right into it. First up, we have Bitter Reunion, a 2-mana enchantment for red and a colorless. You get, when it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. And then it has a static activated of 1, sacrifice Bitter Reunion, creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. This is a curious card. It's got a lot of text on it. Most of it matters. I wish it had flash. I look at this a lot like the old Omen cards from Theros, where like they're enchantments, they come down, they do a thing, and then later you can cash them in for a small amount of extra value.
I talking the Scry 2 ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm not a fan of this. I don't think this is getting played in Pauper Constructed at all with like, sudden windfall and faithless looting and those kind of cards being around makes me think this card is not going to be the one. But this having a 1-mana sacrifice creatures you control gain haste is not nothing. I think that for most purposes, if you want that effect, you're just going to play Bushwhackers instead. But it being stapled onto an enchantment is interesting. It drawing 2 cards, so it's card total neutral, not a card loss, which is pretty unique for a red effect like this. I don't know. I'm not mad at this card, but I don't think it's good enough. What do you got feelings about this?
I think that this card would be super cool
If it had
in
flash,
a Living End deck. But outside of that, I don't know if this has an accurate or a spot that wants it exactly. Um,
I think
this
this would
seems
be
like a
quite
fine
good if it
cube
had
card.
flash.
This would be a fine cube card. Um, this could go in right away over the sorcery speed, discard a card, draw 2. Um,
Oh, the
Cathartic.
cathartic reunion.
Yeah.
I don't even
Um,
know if I played that anymore. I feel like that got
Me
cut
neither.
already.
It has been a bit,
I
but
feel like that got caught
I,
already.
you know, any cube that's running Cathartic could run this that much better.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and then later on, cash it in for the creatures you control gain haste. Granted, you'd probably just do it for one creature to get haste, so you can
Mm-hmm.
alpha strike effectively. But this reminds me of like a conditional fires of Yavimaya,
Yeah,
where the
sort of.
haste is put on
Mm-hmm.
the back end. Um, and I think this, while not a better fires, is a common fires, which I'm a fan of here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you need the haste effect, you're usually just running Bushwhacker instead. But I get where you're coming from. I think the card's fine. I don't think it has a spot in Constructed. Cathartic Reunion could absolutely just straight up 1-for-1 for this card instead. In any cube running Cathartic Reunion still, I'm with you. That's a solid point. Yeah, card's fine. I don't think it'll make a splash in Constructed, but cubes interested and sealed probably is just fine with this card too because it replaces itself.
Yeah, look for any
I wish it
living
had
in
instant.
style
If it was an
decks.
instant, I would be down.
Um, I think the deck that this could most closely go in is the Cycle Storm.
Sure.
Um, oh yeah,
Let's see.
outside of that, good card, fine card to play.
Conscripted Infantry is up next. It is a 3/1 for 3. It's a human soldier for 2 and a red. It says when it dies, create a 1/1 artifact soldier token. I'm not usually a fan of these type of cards. These 3/1s for 3 that don't have first strike, that just want to die. Not a big fan of. I think this card's fine in limited. In fact, I saw it be very good in limited because it trades up a lot and leaves an artifact behind. Um, but in general, this is far from where Pauper constructed power level is, and I think if we're not running Rimrock Knight and Cube, we're definitely not running this.
Yeah, it's fair. I do like that he leaves something behind, but I think that if you're looking for a card specifically that leaves something behind and it's an artifact, you're playing the Mirror, the 2-drop Mirror that dies and makes one.
Sure.
Um, or if you're really concerned about how many tokens you're making off a creature's creature
Mhm.
spell, then you're playing War Marshal. And I don't think that effect is what you want to
Sure.
have 9 to 12 of.
Yeah, I agree. And then you also have the other one. You have Instigator if you want another War Marshal that doesn't have Sacrifice synergy. So um, you've got lots of options at creatures that ETB with a 1/1 instead of having to die for it. The closest relation I have with this card is like the Death Spore Thallid, the 2/2 for 3 that when it dies it leaves a 1/1 Saproling token behind. And that card is like pretty much unplayable in every format, so I don't expect this getting anything.
Uh, yeah, I don't remember that one. It's the green one for 3, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a
Yeah.
2/2, and when it dies, it makes a Thallid. Or it dies when it makes a Saproling.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's like a one of in the green black sacrifice deck sometimes.
Okay.
But contrast that with this, we have Dwarven Forge Chanter, which is a 1/3 for 2, a colorless and a red, and it's a dwarf wizard that has ward, pay 2 life, prowess. This card's very good. I don't think it's quite as good as people think it is. People think this is like Swift Spear's number 5 through 8, and I think that is a joke. Quite honestly, there's no world in which this is comparable to Swift Spear. But 1/3 with prowess is very very relevant because a single trigger dodges lightning bolt, which is very good. Um, Ward pay 2 life is not nothing. I don't know that it's a lot, right? I would almost certainly rather this be Ward like pay 1 colorless. Um, or since this is a Phyrexian set, Ward 1 red Phyrexian, which would be really cool. I mean, it's slightly downgrade from pay 2 life because they get the option to pay mana with it, but it'd be more thematic. Um, I'm a fan of this card. I think we've discussed this card in passing, and I think that the closest comparison I have is the Kessig Flame Breather. It's usually a 3 of in the Kuldotha red deck, and I can see this very easily swapping in for that card. I don't know if it's better than Flame Breather, just because Flame Breather, much like Firebrand Archer, much like Thermal Alchemist, all do direct damage, whereas this still has to get in with combat damage. But they pay a little bit of life to remove it, unlike the other ones. I think this is largely a side grade to them. But I'm interested to test it in Kuldotha Red specifically because non-creature spell and instant or sorcery spells are very different triggers. Especially in an artifact kind of sub-theme deck where playing, synthesizer and Wellsprings and Chrome Stars and stuff can trigger prowess and cannot trigger the Flame Breather. So I think you might be able to eke out a couple extra points of damage. I don't know how much that matters in that deck. Obviously, it's a red deck, so every point of damage is important, but this just seems like one of those cards that might draw, more commitment. Like you might try to go too big on this and get blown out on removal spells a little too often, where the 2 life just is not worth the tempo loss to try to play it. But
Mm.
who knows? I'm interested in testing this. It's almost certainly going to be slam dunked in Kuldotha Red. I don't think I'm going to play this in my mono red burn deck. I'm going to leave the fire breathers there or the flame breathers there. But something like the red black burn deck might use this. The mono red synthesizer deck could certainly use this. So I don't know. I'm interested to test it and see exactly where it falls on the spectrum. But I suspect that it's largely a side grade to cards like Flame Breather.
hmm I do like this card. Like you mentioned, Flame Breather. Even the 0/3 that taps to deal 1 and then untaps when you cast a red spell.
Thermo.
Thermo. I would try this card in place of Thermo.
Worth
Yeah.
noting, Thermo is not specifically a red spell.
Yeah. Um, that is only for the fact that if Thermo comes down, he is still vulnerable to Bolt.
Mhm.
Dwarven Forge Chanter turns any of your opponent's bolts into a char, or like a mini char where they
Mhm.
two and they have to deal 3 here. And if you cast any instant or sorcery in response, then they're taking 4 to kill your 2-drop, and you're just way up.
Well, yeah, and if
I
you have like a lava dart in your graveyard, this isn't boltable, right? So,
exactly. Yeah, like this
um,
card is just going to sit there.
yeah.
He's going to exist, and your opponent can't do anything about it.
But that's kind of my
You're-
problem with him, right? He's not the inevitable damage source that like Thermal Alchemist, Flame Breather, and Flame Firebrand Archer were. Right? They could just sit there and provide a clock, whereas this guy can't. Right? Sitting there doesn't actually do any good. He's got to be able to get in. And without any relevant keywords, like without menace, without haste, without trample, those kind of things, I don't think he ever will. I think a lot of the times he's just gonna run into a blocker, and he's gonna be okay. They're not really gonna care about him just because they're not forced to remove him like they were with Flame Breather or Thermo.
Hmm,
Um,
valid point there. But I think that just keeping him around will be nice. Just having him on the board to have a presence there is going to give you more options per turn.
Definitely.
Uh, so you're going to, and granted, that more option I say is you'll be able to attack with it, as
Mhm.
opposed to tap. But um, you, you're going to be, I don't know, you're going to be scaring your opponent more often with this card, I think, than with the Thermo Alchemist or with the Kessig.
Sure. I have one other comparison I want to draw with this card, and I want to see what your reaction is to it.
I
But
don't like it.
I look at this card and I think, when do you want to run this over Burning Prophet?
Burning
Because Burning
Prophet.
Prophet was the card that I immediately saw when I read this card. It's not true prowess, right? It doesn't buff its toughness, so obviously you can't save it from Lightning Bolt with a single cast. But the Scry 1 after every trigger is like super meaningful, especially in decks like that. And it does still provide the same kind of pressure, right? 1/3 is pretty much unchump blockable. You're not ever gonna trade down with this card. And it does still provide that same kind of offensive pressure where it just gets power pretty much equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn. But I think that the Scry 1 on Burning Prophet is almost always going to be worth the ward pay 2 life and the toughness boost that this card gets. I think that like I kind of mentioned earlier, the safety that this card provides itself is fine because your opponent is never really worried about removing it because it's not one of those persistent damage or persistent value engines that red decks are so accustomed to landing onto these days. Um, but I like I said, I'm happy to test this card. I definitely want to play it in the Koldatha Red synthesizer list. I want to look at this card in like red black burn. I want to look at this card in mono red, although I don't quite think it's good enough for mono red. I just don't think that deck has space for it. Um, I kind of want to look at this card in like the Boros deck. Um,
Hmm.
because that deck very similar to, since it's already running like Swift Spear and Seeker the way, I mean it's got a lot of prowess triggers saved up, right? And just one or two hits with those can get really big really quickly, and this is another one of those kind of
Hmm.
threats that's a little bit harder to remove than Seeker, right? Because Seeker can get bolted and you need two spells to save it, and this guy just literally needs any mana open to threaten saving it, and it's almost not worth trying. um
Hmm.
and that deck
So
never runs out of cards, as we've seen. So I don't know where this has a home. It almost certainly does have a home in Constructed. I question whether or not it's quite as good as people seem to think it is.
To answer your question, the comparison of Dwarven Forge Chanter and Burning Prophet, I think the Scry one is much more relevant when the spells you're casting to trigger their effects do not have draw a card on them.
Definitely.
Um, so if I'm
Well,
playing Ancestral Rage with Dwarven Forge Chanter out,
maybe.
um, I would feel I'd feel much better with Dwarven Forge Chanter than I would with the Burning Prophet. So I'm casting anything I could take a look at the top deck with the Burning Prophet and then be like, all right, well, I don't want that.
Sure.
Or maybe I do, and and then I'll know when to stop casting spells with Burning Prophet. But
Sure.
for Dwarven Forge Chanter, I'll still want to just, get a little bit bigger. Maybe like
Mm-hmm.
cast one non-creature spell with a draw a
Sure.
turn before I feel safe swinging with this guy. Um, and
Yeah, I don't
then
scry
I
one with cards like what is it like um experimental what's it called? The exile 2, you can cast them until the end of your next turn.
Synthesizer.
No, that's exile 1. You can play it this
Oh,
turn.
no, you said Exile
Experimental
2.
Frenzy? Is that what it's called?
It's not Experimental Frenzy, I don't think.
You know what I'm talking about though, right?
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So like I think that the Scry 1 comes into play very very big when the spells like you said that the spell like doesn't say draw a card. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think prowess is better in decks that can't draw the cards that they're looking for because like seeing a card on top and saying yeah I'll keep it on top isn't nearly as good as looking at a card and saying yeah I'll draw that card. Um, right? So I think the Scry one actually has additive value when you're immediately getting the card, right? It gives you additional information in order to plan out the remainder of your turn. Each time you get to trigger it, each time you get to look and say, yes, I want to draw that card. No, I don't want to draw that card. And you can kind of sculpt your turn off of it, not just your next turn off of it. Um,
I see what you mean. I like it off of the Dwarven Forge Chanter with when you have the draw card effect because it is the card advantage there. I understand that the Burning Prophet gets more value in total from there, but you get to sculpt your hand in a way
mhm.
that you can um, inform your next plays. Whereas Dwarven Forge Chanter lets you keep fueling the prowess there if you need to.
Yeah, Dwarven
And
Forge
you only
Chainer
need
is kind of those things where you just kind of go big until you run out of steam, and Burning Prophet just makes it so that you can go big, but you also are less likely to run out of steam. The trade off there is just that Burning Prophet is obviously easier to kill, to prevent you from
uh,
stacking that, whereas Forge Chanter will continue to stack up, right?
exactly. And I
Um,
think that being able to constantly have a card, regardless of what it is, if you have a mountain in your hand, you have open mana on the battlefield, right? You've cast one spell. Your opponent doesn't want to try and kill Dwarven Forge
mhm.
Chanter. Like you're playing that mind game of I have a card in my hand, I could stop you from killing my guy. I could, not
Oh
I
no,
will, but I could.
definitely. Yeah, I'm
Um,
with the
so
this card is going to be very hard to kill. My
yeah,
primary argument is do you care if it stays on the board? And the answer is I don't really think there are a lot of game states in which you care about this card. Unless they've casted, 3, 4 spells, you are likely going to be able to just stonewall it on any good blocker you're already playing. Um,
I
and
like it when you cast a single spell, just because you're swinging in for the two. They're not likely to stop you if they are playing something with even 5 toughness and you shock that thing. You're trading it, or yeah, um,
But that's kind of
he
the
gets
problem,
in
right? You're
pretty
trading it, and
consistent.
you're going down a card in that trade.
You are, but I'm saying like this is still a 2 drop. You're still getting the added value of those other things. This this guy trades for things much bigger than him,
Mhm.
and they don't want to make that trade.
Well, but
So
so
you're
does Burning
getting in for
Prophet.
the
That's kind of my
guaranteed
point,
damage
right?
there.
I think that the trade thing is less relevant than the this dodges more removal. The toughness boost is very important for this, right? Burning Prophet's going to trade into the same things this will, um, but except Lightning Bolt, right?
Yeah,
um,
sure.
but I just
Mm.
I don't think this is ever going to be Lightning Bolt bait. Nobody cares if you keep this card around, right? Nobody's going to try to Lightning Bolt this. So the
Yeah,
fact that it's
but
bolt proof isn't a huge deal.
I see what your point is. But this card is going to get in consistent uh, damage because even
I,
with
I
that,
don't think it is. That's the
I
point.
think I believe it will because what are you comfortable blocking this with?
I'm blocking
Say
this with
there's
literally. If you've activated this one time, I'm blocking this with anything with 4 toughness or more. all the time. Because you've got to cast 2 spells for it not also to die. And anything that you're casting on my dude so that this card trades with it is fine with me, because I'm going to go up in the exchange. Sure, it's your
But you
2
said
drop, but I
for
just traded 2 cards for it.
toughness or more.
Huh?
Do you mean you said for toughness or more? Do you
Yeah.
mean for power and for toughness?
Well, I mean
'Cause-
4/4, right? I'm not likely to
yeah.
have
Okay.
a 2/4. And if I
Anyway.
am, I'm probably still blocking. Because I
Hey,
want to
Wall
make you cast another spell just to get through my 2/4, right?
Wall of Blossoms could exist. Um. Yeah, I feel fine just shocking the thing or lava darting your face or lava darting it. Or, any single
Well, so you can't lava dart my
spell.
face. You have to lava dart it.
Yeah, because I cast it one time. Yeah, so I'd have
Exactly.
to lava
But
dart the
so
thing.
that's kind of the point I'm getting, right? Is that even if you're killing my dude and keeping this around, you are expending resources that should be going to my face on the creature in order to enable a trade. And on the off chance I'm blocking with a 5/5 or a 4/4, you've got to cast 2 additional spells to keep it alive. And one of them has to point at my creature in order to trade, which is gaining me life. Right? So I can't imagine situations where you are realistically attacking into cards that are played right now, like Terror, Gurmag Angler, Mer Enforcer, things like that, where you're not just going to run into a situation where, sure, you can eat their Gurmag Angler, but you're going down a card overall in a deck that doesn't have a consistent draw card engine outside of Synthesizer, which is situational but good. Your card advantage, your damage per card is much more important than theirs most of the time. And going down in the exchange for an aggressive trade is bad for you actively in that situation. They're avoiding the ward, so it doesn't matter that ability existed, and as long as it dies, it might as well have been a Burning Prophet, which instead of making it so they couldn't lightning bolt it, would have made sure that your next draw was still gas. Right? I don't know. I think that the situations in which this card is better than that or Flame Breather are going to be really few and far between. Like I said, I'm down to test it. I think the card's good. I don't know. I don't think it's that good.
That's fair. I think that the disconnect is I'm assuming there's pressure on the board. And you're assuming it's this card against any other card.
Well, yeah. because when you play in any of the decks that we've named outside of exactly Koldatha Red, the majority of the time you are limited to 1 or 2 dudes. Right? Koldatha Red goes a little bit wider, a little bit faster, but even then, in the face of Makeshift and Clark Clan Shaman and most of the other fast decks that are good in the format have Suffocating Fumes and stuff to eliminate wide boards. A lot of the time it is just going to be whatever your 2-drop is versus whatever their big dude is, and you've got to make that count. And I just think that most of the time you would rather have Burning Prophet to make sure your top deck was gas, or something that dealt direct damage so that you had reach. Because then you don't even need to go to combat. You can just make them remove it. And while it doesn't have ward, I mean, you got to look at what's played, right? So if they're wasting a cast down on your Flame Breather, it's not good for you. But if they're wasting a Snuff Out on your Flame Breather, it's great for you.
We're stuffing on this guy. Whoa, boy.
Well, nobody's fucking casting a Snuff Out on this thing. But I think we've talked about it enough. We've made our opinions clear. It's fine. I'm excited to test it. We'll see where it lands. I think that the hype is a little overinflated around it. I don't think that anyone's really critically broken down what this is good into and what is good against it, and done the plus minus evaluation. I think that people will be disappointed a lot of the times by this card. It's not Swift Spear, which is what a lot of people seem to think it is.
Yeah, this thing swings 2 turns after Swift Spear does.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Next is Excavation Explosion, which is a 3-mana sorcery that says deals 3 damage to any target. Create a tap Power Stone for 2 and a red. Lightning Bolt exists. This card might as well not exist outside of Limited, because no one outside of Limited is going to know what this card is. There's no shot this is played in the cube. It's a sorcery.
That and a 3.
Yeah, like, no shot. I think this is almost a whiff. Like we don't have to talk a whole lot about this card. It's not going
So
to be played in
Fallaci
much.
Chain Dancer. That's-
All right. What's next? Do you have any real thoughts about this card?
I mean, I wish it were better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Falaji Chain Dancer is the next up. It's a 2/4 human soldier for 3 and a red. It says 2 mana. It gains double strike until end of turn. I did not play this in my pre-release, but the guy next to me was. This card is gross in limited. It's so good. There are so many X1s in this format, and this card absolutely obliterates them. Threat of activation is huge on this card. It's wild how good this card is, especially when you compare it with or combine it with what is it? Mishra's command, the X double red where you can give something plus X plus O and haste until end of turn. Dude, this card gets nuts because you get to choose 2 modes. I watched my opponent pay 5 mana with 9 mana available. So X was 5, 2 red, 2 mana open. Burn your blocker, give my dude plus 5 plus O, give it double strike attack for 14. It was disgusting. And that's all on color. That's just red card, red card. Yeah, very, very strong and limited. Outside of limited, it's never seeing the light of day. It's a 4-drop. No shot. There is a very small niche consideration for this card in the cube, and I think most of the people advocating for it in cube are delusional, so I will not be putting it in mine.
But have you considered what happens when you activate it twice in a single turn? It's like quadruple strike.
No, it loses double strike. It's like a positive counter and a negative counter.
Oh, no, it's 2 positives counter a positive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It's like 2 negatives equal a positive, 2 positives equal a negative. You didn't learn that?
Yeah. Oh, naturally. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next up is a card actually worth talking about, so we can go down the rabbit hole a little bit, which is Goblin Blast Runner. It's a 1/2 goblin for 1 red, which is the best combination of power, toughness, and mana cost, and creature type. And it says it gets +2 +0 and has menace as long as you've sacrificed a permanent this turn. This card already has goblin decks in leagues. You line this up with Goblin Blast Runner into Mog War Marshal or Koldath, land synthesizer rebirth. There's so many combinations to get this card turned on turn 2. You've got lava darts, you've got fire blasts, you've got goblin grenades. I mean, you have reach for days in that deck. It's definitely going to be good, and this swings in for 3 on turn 2, which is double activated Swift Spear. And it has menace, so it can't even be chumped like Swift Spear can. I'm into this card. This card is great. I don't know that this makes it into very many decks that exist right at this moment, but this almost certainly makes it into Constructed. It will have a Goblin deck. I don't know how good that Goblin deck will be, but man, if it's good, this card's good. And then outside of that, if that red-black sacrifice deck we were talking about for Gixian Infiltrator exists, this card's in it, 100%.
Oh yeah, most certainly. There's no way this card doesn't make it in there.
Yeah. What else you got? Any other comments on this boy? This is a good boy. I like this card.
Oh yeah, no, it's about time we got Goblin Guide.
Right. We got Swift Spear. It was about time we got Goblin Guide,
Yeah, I mean, come on. No, this is an insane card. I'm absolutely ecstatic about it. The 2 on the toughness is so much more relevant when it's a 1-drop.
Right.
Yeah, this is an all-star for sure. There's no world in which this doesn't make it into a constructed deck.
Yeah, the only way you could make this card better is if it had haste.
Yeah. Haste, +2 +0 and menace if you sacrifice a permanent this turn.
Worth noting, this is not a conditional, and it does not check upon resolution, so if you've sacrificed something before casting this card, it comes into play as a 3/2 with menace, which is meaningful for something, I'm sure. Maybe if
Well,
you follow it with a bushwhacker to give it haste, then then it matters. But you can sacrifice stuff before this comes into play. It only cares about if you've sacrificed something this turn. It doesn't care if whether or not you did it before or after it came into play.
also, you remember that card from earlier, Bitter Reunion?
Yeah.
Uh,
If you
uh,
sacrifice it to give
mm,
creatures haste, it triggers this. Yeah, I'm into that.
huh, yeah. I mean, Goblin Blast Runner, pop your thing. That
Sure.
seems like a pretty successful turn three.
Especially if the discarded card was like a, I don't
Oh,
know.
like a freaking lava dart. Whatever,
Yep.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Lava dart.
You know, it's a flashback of some sort of
Mhm.
value in the graveyard. Hell, it could even be that 3 drop from New Capenna where you pay 5 and you draw 2, discard 1.
Oh no, I was thinking it could be a rally the peasants so that you get the flashback of trumpet blast for 2 mana and you dodge the white
Ah,
mana cost.
you're
Yeah,
living grasshopper.
yeah. All right, great card. Buy your foils; they will be played. Next up, Mishra's Domination. 2 mana aura for a red and a colorless. It enchants a creature. As long as you control the creature, it gets +2/+0, and otherwise it can't block. This does an insane. What's it called? The human matters pacifism that we were just talking about in the cube.
Yeah, Bonds of Faith.
Bonds of Faith. Yeah. This does a really big Bonds of Faith impression, and honestly, I think it's a better Bonds of Faith. It's just not in the right color. Um, I like that this doesn't say humans on it. um,
Yeah, I suppose we're about that time in Magic's history where we can just go into straight up good 2 mana auras that are
um,
both bumps and blocker removal.
that being said, I don't see this having a home in the cube. I think Bonds of Faith was in the color that wanted it, and this is not. But in limited, this card was good. In constructed, there's no shot this makes it. It doesn't have a keyword on it. If it said first strike, haste, menace, anything like that, maybe it would be considered, but it doesn't, so it's not going to be.
So if it was can't block, if it or if you control the creature, it's a cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
pretty sweet.
yeah. Good and limited, bad and everything else. Moving right along.
I mean,
Sticking with Mishra's cards, we've got Mishra's Onslaught, which is a 4 mana instant. For 3 and a red, you get a choose one, create two 1/1 colorless artifact soldier tokens, or creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Um, I'll let you take the lead on this one. I have thoughts. I don't think it's relevant and constructed, but it's good in some other places.
yeah, I mean, uh, I would like it if it costed 3.
Yeah.
Just like the 3 mana
Mm-hmm.
instant speed, make 2 1/1 artifacts, the Mer ambush or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this where creatures you control +2/+0 is a trumpet blast. It's also historically a 3 mana thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not overpowered at 3.
Nope.
I think that if you even had this at 3, you wouldn't overshadow the other ones because there's enough personality in the other cards that would lead you to playing those other ones instead. So I think this just costs 1 too much.
I agree.
Also, the art looks like slivers every time I look at it, so it throws me off. But
Oh, you know what? You're right. Yes, I see slivers too. I saw Pyramid Head the first time I looked at this card.
oh, I get it. I see it right there.
Um, but yeah, I think this card's fine. I think it's pretty good and limited. I think it's reasonable in the cube, although I don't think it'll see play. I agree. I think it costs 1 too much. Um, and it's a 4-drop, so it's never seeing constructed play. Easy as that. Let's see. Next one is a card that a lot of people are really interested in, so I'm sure that you probably have some thoughts on it. It's Pendragon Strongbowl, which is a 3 mana, 2/3 Minotaur for 2 and a red. It says 1 mana, sack an artifact. It gets 1/1 until end of turn and deals 1 damage to each opponent. A lot of people are calling this makeshift munition number 5. I don't hate that comparison. I just
do.
don't know how much of a makeshift munition you want that can be removed by cast down. But I do like that it effectively doubles the damage output, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I do like that it doubles the damage output. It is each opponent. Um, I don't know how many decks play for cast or for makeshifts.
No
So
one.
I don't. Yeah. So I don't think this makes it
People
into a deck
play to
anyways.
it very at max.
Yeah. So like, eh. Also, I thought that it was a Rhino until I read the creature type.
Nope, it's a
Um,
Minotaur. It's a 2/3, as
yeah, he's got
they
the
should be.
horn hiding behind his ear.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, power toughness is okay. Um, I'm not a fan of the whole sacrificing an artifact only, just because we've seen other sacrifice a creature or
Yes.
artifact effects. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a card.
I
You
wish
can.
this had one of two things changed about it. And you kind of hit the point on your last sentence. I wish that this said 1 mana sack an artifact or creature. Or if it's going to stay on artifacts only, I wish it said 1/1 counter and we went the Hobble Fiend route, where it was
Mm,
just eat something, get a 1/1 counter, but instead of having built in trample, it said ping your opponent each time you activate it.
that'd be nice.
Yeah, I would be way more on board with this card if either one of those changes happened. You kind of nailed it. This is not makeshift munitions number 5 because nobody runs 4. Makeshifts number 2 and 3 are just more makeshifts, and nobody runs that many.
Hmm.
But I think this is definitely in contention for the cube. Like I kind of drew the Hobble Fiend comparison once. I think that's pretty apt comparison. Hobblefiend was cut from the cube, but maybe this card is, just that little bit better because it does have direct damage. Um, I don't think so. I think this would have to be able to sacrifice creatures, but I'm open to that kind of discussion about it. I think maybe it has a spot in the cube. Um, but I'd have to do a lot of number crunching about the number of artifacts and, how many you have to draft to make this good. Let's see. What's up next? Raised to the ground. Ooh, it has some of my favorite text on any magic card. It is a sorcery for 2 and a red, and the first line on this card says the spell can't be countered. I'm interested. It just says destroy target artifact. Okay. If its mana value was 1 or less, draw a card. Um, I think if this was an instant, it would be in contention. But because it is a sorcery, and because it
Mm,
only draws a card if it resolves, and if the mana value is 1 or less, which is essentially just if you're targeting a land with it. Um, in Pauper Constructed, most of the artifact lands you're up against are the come into play tapped indestructible bridges, so you're not destroying them. You're not paying 3 mana for an uncounterable draw 1 card. Um, and it's not an instant. I don't think this is gonna see any play. I know a lot of people had high hope for like good new artifact hate coming out
mhm,
of the Brothers War, and I think that a lot of people looked at this card and saw what it could have been but wasn't. And I'm
mhm,
I'm one of those people. Um,
mm.
I wish this card was an instant. I wish that it didn't care what the CMC was and it just said destroy target artifact, draw a card. Um, and then maybe I would talk about it, right? 3 mana instant, can't be countered, destroy an artifact, draw a card, I'd be into.
Sure.
But even then, it would be a tough sell, right? Just because makeshift munitions and deadly dispute and reckoner's bargain all exist, a lot of the times they're just going to sacrifice their target in response.
Hmm.
Shit, half the targets in Affinity you're going to target with this, they want it to die, so they draw a card because most of them just say when it goes to the graveyard, draw a card, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not a fan of this card. I think I look at
So
it and see what could have been, and it makes me sad.
yeah, so there's three things that I wanted to change on this, right? You touched on two of them. You said sorcery, and if it didn't care about mana cost, but I wish it said exile target artifact. I know it's
Oh,
not typically a
definitely.
red thing, but if it said exile target artifact on 3 at instant speed, can't be countered, and then it can care about this CMC all at once.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
love this. I'd play
Exile
this.
would be great.
Yeah. Um,
Problem is,
Hell, even at
Exile won't
sorcery,
exist out
I'd
of
play this if I
Wind.
were on the play. But um, not as a 4-of though.
Mm-hmm.
So this I don't know, it's so close
Yeah.
to being what we needed, but this is what we deserve, I guess.
Fair. Yeah, fair enough. That being said, I think Affinity is in a pretty reasonable spot where it's in the top four, but it's not the best deck. So I don't know that we needed more Affinity hate at the moment. I think that the majority of the format is going to pretty drastically shift towards like aggro that's too fast for Affinity or control that doesn't give a shit about Affinity. Um, and I think we're seeing kind of the makings of that with like some of these Goblin Brews and a lot of the Tron builds coming out of Energy Refractor. So we'll see what the format lands on, but I think we're going to see a big resurgence of Tron decks. And if we see a big resurgence of Tron decks, we're going to see decks that end up being fast enough to beat Tron, which arbitrarily are decks fast enough to beat Affinity. And Tron doesn't care about Affinity's late game because Tron late game's harder. So, yeah, we'll see. Next one up is Rock Hunter. It's a
Here we
3/1
go.
human soldier for 1 and a red with reach.
It's notable to say that it's ROC, not ROCK. Although you do see more rocks in this art than you do.
I mean, you see a bunch of feathers, right? It's insinuated that she's riding a rock, I think.
No, I think she's hunting rocks from the ground. Because
The
she's got reach. She's not got flying, you know?
Well, I understand, but like the angle at which the card is, and the fact that we can see like the peaks of stuff from the background, as well as the wind markers around her, it looks like she's going through a cloud. And then you see one feather very stably at the top of her artwork, but you see another kind of less clear, kind of hazy feather passing in front of her left shin there. Or at least it looks like it's a feather. It's too blurry to be 100%. And
I
then
think that
what
stands.
she's on, while it definitely looks like the ground, I don't know. It's kind of blurry. It could definitely be feathers, just on a really big thing. I don't know.
See, I'm really confused with the Dutch angle here. Because, like, she's got rocks above her and seemingly rocks below her with the
Yeah,
sand streams coming across. I don't know where this person could be. Like, freaking Zendikar, I guess? No, but. Regardless of that, 2 mana, 3/1 reach. It's a card.
I don't think it's a good card.
It's a card.
I mean, we have what Blade of the Sixth Pride, Rimrock Knight. We have a lot of 3/1s for 2, and none of them get any love. So I don't see any reason why this will.
Yeah. So there's a reason that we were mostly struggling with the art. It's the only thing to talk about on this card.
That's fair. Next up is Sibling Rivalry. It's completely unplayable. Cool. 3 mana and a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target artifact or creature. Till end of turn, untap it. It gains haste and create a power stone. So this is a 4 mana threaten with a power stone on it. Threaten's not even played, so no shot. Cool art though. I don't know why they're fighting over an Urza automation, though. It definitely seems like this should have been Urza automation fights Mishra automation, not they fight over control of Urza's thing. I don't know.
You see, I mean, artwork looks cool. Looks
It
like this
probably looks
automaton
awesome
is
in
being
foil
ripped apart, but
with those lightning bolts.
yeah.
All right.
Oh man.
Next one is Toma Cole Scrapsmith. It's a 2/1 for a red and 2 colorless. It's a human artificer. Oh, it's the red mill cycle. It says ETB mill 3 cards. You may put an artifact card from among them milled this way. Put into your hand. If you don't, put a 1/1 counter on it. So at worst, it's mill 3 3/2 for 3, which is bad. And at best, it's a 2/1 for 3 that gets a very specific artifact draw. I haven't done the math, but I imagine the number of artifacts you would have to run to make this card good is much too high.
I mean, I think this is the second easiest one to get, though.
Probably. I mean, because you can have artifact creatures, you can have artifact permanents, you can have artifact lands, right? So there's a lot
Hmm.
of ways to build artifacts into your decks in order to trigger. So yeah, it's probably the second easiest to get, but is it worth the pay? Like,
No, it's not. It's not
yeah,
worth
this
it.
doesn't seem
But
good.
you could you could do the thing. But
That's
are you
true.
winning the game even if you do the thing?
No.
And the answer is probably no.
All right. Next up is a great pun, and I'm a fan of great puns. It's a terrible card, but it's a great name. It is Unleash Shell, which is a 5 mana instant for 3 and 2 red. It deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker and 2 damage to that permanent's controller. Yeah. I mean, this is good and limited, and it's absolutely terrible everywhere else. What a name though, and such cool art. This
What
has
was the
very
cost?
non-magic art to me.
Yeah, this looks like the 40K
Yeah, it
stuff.
looks like it should have been a 40k card. I was just gonna say that. Like this looks
Mhm.
very like if they just reversed the color scheme so that the beams coming towards them were red and the beams going out were green, this would be a Necron card.
Oh man, I didn't even see that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just straight up reverse the color scheme, this is like the same art. Like you could just put this art on a Necron card and people would be like, "Oh, cool." Like yeah, unplayable, but really cool art. It seems
Yeah,
very non-magic to me though. That's what I will say.
yeah. I mean, I don't think this card does anything worth talking about. It kills the thing, taps, or it tickles its controller.
Hmm?
It needs to numbers need to be played around with on this to make it effective. But
Yep. All right. Last card is Whirling Strike, which is a 2 mana instant for a red and a colorless. It says target creature gains +2/+0 and gains first strike and trample until end of turn. Um, eh. I'm largely unsatisfied with this card, but I'm not upset either. This has a very white themed artwork. It is a small human soldier demonstrating what looks like first strike. I mean, again, if they messed with the color scheme a little bit and just showed these as like white blurbs instead of like red blurbs, uh, this is a white combat trick.
yeah, sure,
Uh,
the screams Wojak at me. Like this is totally
yeah,
boring. Um, even the helmets, right? Like
right? Yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that they're wearing armor at all
yeah.
makes it seem like a white red thing.
Yeah,
Uh, it's it costs too much for the thing
yeah. It
when
needs
we
to be a
are
one.
when we have double strike and trample
It
on.
needs to be a 1 red spell, or it needs to be a 2 red spell and say draw a card or scry 2.
I think that it would need a different keyword instead of first strike and trample. Um, if it were like +2/+0 and haste and cost one less, that would be really
Oh, like a reckless
really good.
charge side grade.
Yeah, something along the lines of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, outside of that, you're not gonna get anywhere with this.
Yeah, there's no
We
shot
already
this is played and constructed. We're trying to make it playable and limited, and even then it struggles.
we already have double strike and trample with ferocious. We already have reckless charge.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no area to cover that red cares about, or that hot dogs even care about, left to be covered.
It
So you
needs
need
draw a card on it.
That's probably fair.
If this was crash through, but for first strike instead of trample, it had no power toughness modification, it had 1 red instant creatures you control gain first strike draw a card, it'd be pretty good.
We have that Warlord's Fury.
What?
Warlord's Fury.
Oh, I didn't even know that card existed. All right, so probably never mind. It wouldn't be pretty good because it's literally not played and we already have it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, this
Like
is
I said,
not
like
good.
there's not a lot of space
Yeah,
for red combat tricks.
yeah, it could have been
Um,
behind it if maybe this was like a better what was it like Giant's Might or whatever the 3/1
oh,
Titans
Titan
Titan
strength.
Strength.
Hmm.
With Scry 2 on it or something. Yeah, I don't know. This needs some sort of like card refill or advantage engine to be playable.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this card just isn't there.
Yep.
Trying to do all the things, but it's doing all of them
None of them
poorly.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that wraps up the red cards for Brothers War. Let us know if you think we misevaluated anything down in the comment section below. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. It really does help the channel grow. And since we just hit our 200 sub limit, remember to keep an eye out on the next video after the set review series finishes. The top 5 video is going to have a giveaway for our awesome custom token set. So stay tuned for that. As usual, guys, goodbye forever. Unless I see you next time. Peace.